Hello and welcome to our video contemplation of Day Signature 59. This frequency corresponds to the Prince of Hearts, the prime instinct to empower, and the noble role of perfection. It is represented by the angels of affection and union.
So we have the 37th angel of affection, who walks the pathway of tenderness to become the embodiment of family. And then we also have the 59th angel of union, who walks the pathway of openness to become the embodiment of intimacy.
And so, as usual, we begin at the beginning with the archetype of the prince, this character of the prince. You mentioned something right out the gate earlier that is worth reminding our viewers of, the connection between the two.
Yeah, so just like the king and the queen, they're a unit. The prince and the princess are similar in that they're two sides of the same coin. They very much are connected in what they are moving through, what they experience, particularly this theme of transformation. The princess, our keynote for the princess is grace, and similarly, the prince has the keynote of elegance.
Yeah. This is very yin-yang.
Yeah.
Water, fire. There's something inherent, something natural, something obvious, something even inevitable about what's moving through the character of the princess. She is the embodiment of grace. That grace just pours out of her. The prince is more active. This is a more active element or expression of that grace. He's going to make something of that. He's going to cultivate a state of elegance. It's a connection to the same natural movement of grace, but it's a very active engagement with that grace. He's becoming more graceful in a very specific, very focused, very intentional way. That's the masculine version of the feminine expression of grace. Both are a part of you. That grace is as inherent to you as it was to the princess. And this capacity to expand on that, to perfect and to improve. I put quotation marks around that because there's no need to improve. It's just that this perfection grows. We've talked about that many times before. So that grace wants to move. It wants to reach beyond you. It wants to find new modes of expression. And elegance is that opportunity to participate with the natural movement in a focused and intentional way. We like to refer to this as elegance, a cultivated state of grace.
Right. This is something that the king already has. As we know, the prince will one day become the king.
Yes.
The king also is wisdom. That is our main keynote for the king. And so this is what the prince is, obviously has not yet embodied this keynote of wisdom, because what the prince is going to have is life experience. Like that is really what the prince is going to be moving through in order to cultivate that wisdom that the king has inherently, because the king has already done that.
Yeah, the princess is growing up to be the queen, so to speak. And so that grace becomes a foundation of power, a source of power that she is able to draw from and use as a source of direction for her king. They work together. This prince is going to grow up to be the king, and his efforts to establish a sense of being, a sense of self that moves fluidly and intentionally through life, this development of elegance is the very thing that's going to move him through different experiences that simultaneously develop this wisdom that he can embody and rule through as the king. He meets life differently as the king than he does as the prince. Keep in mind, as always, that all of these characters are alive within us. All of these characters are representative of processes which continue to play out within us on every subject of our experience. We are not just one of these things, nor are we attempting to attain to any one of these things. We are always all of these things. There are parts of you which have matured, which have connected to an unmovable source of power and understand that and can meet life from that place. And there are parts of you which are still developing that understanding, which are still totally innocent, totally fluid, and engaged in this process of continual development and maturation.
Mm-hmm.
At no point along the way are you in the wrong place. At every point along the way, you're exactly where you need to be on every subject as every subject evolves. It's an evolutionary process. So these are just representatives of an inner movement. But we like to give them names, and we like to think of them in this way, and we like to meet them piece by piece, because what you end up discovering is this family of interactions within you, all of which are always playing out. And your awareness of them is the very thing that gives you the grace you deserve to be where you are at any given time, understanding that it's part of a very, very purposeful, very, very beneficial movement.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I was thinking maybe we could read the word matches, because
let's start there.
They're really sort of summarize everything that you just talked about really well, I think.
Okay.
So
cool.
There are several words that match the 59, which is this frequency, that really describe this Prince of Hearts, I think. So okay. I'll read them. We have blameless, bring only good, celebrate beauty, conviction, don't hold back, evolving,
wow,
exploding, expander, fertility, growth, leadership, living beauty, open heart, overcoming, perfection, purification, rise, O King,
wow,
and unflinching.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So all of those words and phrases are exact matches to this frequency of 59. That's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
We see this theme of evolution, this theme of growth, of rising, of becoming,
right,
all woven in.
And power is the prime instinct.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm seeing. If you visit our website, especially on a computer, and read the icons at the top of this page from left to right, you're literally going to read the words empower perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's the prime instinct to empower and the noble role of perfection. Empower perfection. What does that mean? What does it mean to empower perfection? We already know that the Prince is engaged in an active pursuit of self-empowerment, of development, of becoming more elegant. So there is this kind of inner decision to become the king. Not just the awareness that someday he will have to, but this awareness that every step along the way is developing something that will benefit him in the future. So he's very aware of this in a way that the princess didn't need to be. She was represented beautifully by the word blameless.
Mm-hmm.
He is represented more effectively by this word empower, or by the word, we had expander, we had evolving, we had growth. He's very aware of that movement.
Yeah, I also see this awareness of being very close to the king. So the prince is constantly bombarded by what the king has. And so I really see this sort of, I guess, like the prince sort of knows that one day he will be the king, but he probably wonders how the king got to be where he is.
That's interesting.
So you see this theme, this embodiment of family in the 37th angel. The king is surrounded by all of these people who love him. And so the prince is just wondering, like, how did that happen? Wondering if he's even worthy of that kind of adoration, all of these things that are inherent to what it means to be the king. But the prince knows that someday that's going to be him. And so he's going to be moving through this process of understanding what it means to be part of a family, also understanding what it means to be, to have that wisdom, to have that stature that the king has. And these two angels, I think, really demonstrate what those pathways to that place looks like.
That's pretty cool. Okay. I hadn't really thought of it like that. And before we jump into the angels, we need to stay here for a moment, because what it does is it to me anyway makes our sense of this character very personal. It's like you can imagine this prince, maybe one of the hardest parts of being the prince is knowing that you will one day be that, but you are not that now. It's like, how do you get from here to there?
Mm-hmm.
How long is that going to take? And how will you know when it's time? You know, like there are a lot of kind of anxious questions that would surface in the awareness. If you know this process is playing out, then you're wondering if you will be good enough, if you will be able to meet that moment, and or you're wondering how long it's going to take because you feel ready now, and why is it taking so long? There's a lot of potential comparative distraction that can play out on this particular movement. Mm-hmm. So a great part of the prince's responsibility is, I think, revealed through his role of perfection. His responsibility is to understand that it doesn't matter whether or not he ever becomes king. Where he is right now is perfect. And he needs to understand that in order to become king, he first needs to recall his attention to where he is now, to recognize the perfection inherent to his current position. Mm-hmm. In doing this, quite paradoxically, he permits the evolution of that perfection. This is what I see in the words empower perfection. How do we empower perfection? We're not like spark plugs lighting this thing of perfection which lives as some potential within us. Not even close. That perfection is already vital. It's already alive. It's already lit. You are already perfect. Each of us is already perfect. So how do you empower perfection? You empower perfection by recognizing that perfection now. By understanding that what you are, where you are, everything that contributes to this moment is already perfect. And that the more completely you can relax into that understanding, the more quickly that perfection will expand. You're getting out of the way and allowing that inherent perfection to express, which is the very thing it needs in order to propel you along this trajectory, this path, this process we're describing as you grow up into a fuller and fuller and fuller expression of that perfection for all time. Mm-hmm. The fact of the matter is, we never arrive. The prince is always a part of us. This is how infinity moves. The pattern of growth is inherent and persistent. It will not end. So it's not like we're attaining to something we arrive at and then quit. We are continually drawn back into this upward, outward spiral of continual growth. Perfection is always the truth and always becoming more. So to empower that perfection, we recognize it now. We don't get to work becoming perfect. That's the wild thing about this prince. Yes, he's intentionally engaged. Yes, he's cultivating something. He's involved. He's participating. It's all on purpose. And yet still, he's not involved in the work of self-development or self-improvement at all. He's in the process of self-remembering, of recalling his awareness to the fact of his perfection. That's a very different action. The work of remembering. This is, I can't help but think of the word family that you used. It's the individual family. It's the family of you as you recall all these parts of yourself that you've either disqualified or given away indiscriminately. It's about remembering these truths that you have convinced yourself couldn't possibly be true because they're too good, because they're too big, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's about remembering ourselves, coming back to the home of our inner world to recognize that perfection. And again, amazingly, that action is the very thing required in order to empower or permit that perfection to continue doing what it has always done and always will do, which is grow. It will continue to grow. So that's what we see here. And of course, it's going to lead us seamlessly into these angel themes that we find. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm seeing something pretty exciting in the angel connections. But I'd love to hear what you're picking up on, because I can sense that you already are like connecting dots between empowerment, perfection, and the angels. You're also talking a lot about family. I just want to learn what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that I simply want to point out that the prince is sort of going to have to move through this evolution, but he doesn't quite understand that that's going to require something of him. He's going to have experiences. He's going to have to empower himself to make the choice in that direction of the things that he most desires, which are, to be the king, to be worthy of that place, and to also, have that family around you. It is one of these things where the prince is born into something, so it feels like it's supposed to be automatic, but he's going to realize that it actually is going to take a movement. It's going to take a cultivation. It's going to take conscious decisions to get to that place.
That's really interesting, because you've heard us say over and over again that these processes we meet are not rooted in a need to earn.
Right.
And it can sound very much, based on what you're describing, that it's like, hey, he thinks he's born into it, but he's going to have to earn it. I don't think that's quite what we're dealing with, though.
No, it's subtle.
The distinction is subtle, but needs to be stated.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because what we find, what you're describing, I think we find in the pathways of these angels, just as you've said.
Mm-hmm.
We have the angel of affection, who walks the pathway of tenderness to become the embodiment of family. And we have the angel of union, who walks the pathway of openness to become the embodiment of intimacy. The connection between the pathways of tenderness and openness is worth looking at, especially because I feel that as often as we've said that the pathways are home base for the practical application of these conversations, we've only hardly scratched the surface of getting that across.
Right.
Not only to you, the viewer, but to ourselves. It's like we're still learning how fundamental these pathways are. I can't help but see everything we're describing hinging on the pathway of the 59th angel, this pathway of openness. We have the expression of union and the pathway of openness to produce the embodiment of intimacy. So in human design, this used to be the gate of transparency. It was about transparency. That was a word that was often connected to the 59. But we've used the word openness here. We were led to use the word openness. Even though we have a strong personal connection to the word transparency, it was clear that the word openness was correct. And only today am I beginning to see, at least to some extent, why that may be. When we're thinking in terms of transparency, we think in terms of honesty, being kind of an open book, right? And obviously that's going to be a part of this, as it is a part of every single pathway we meet. There's no way to grow, no way to evolve, no way to move void of self-honesty. If you're not honest with yourself, you're never going to change. You're going to remain exactly where you are. You're going to be held in place by that unwillingness to look at yourself. That's certainly playing a part in the same way it plays a part in every conversation. But I think what's happening here in the pathway of openness is actually far more connected to the expression of union than I've ever imagined. Union will always begin within you. We have clear portraits of union, for example, our union. We think in terms of our relationship to other people when we think in terms of union. But what's happening here, I think, is first inner. And when we look within and we consider what it could be referring to, immediately I'm reminded of the forgotten sense and everything that it shows us in the very first level of the forgotten sense. We have this creative capacity which hinges upon our willingness to connect or unify the heart and the mind. This union is first mental and emotional. It's about the mind and it's about the heart. It's about having an open mind and an open heart. Why? Because if your mind is not open to seeing things differently than you have, you will not grow. If your mind is not willing to see what you're looking at differently and to interpret what you're looking at differently than you ever have before, you're held in place. There needs to be a mental openness available to this process before the process is permitted to unfold. The heart, too, must be thrown open. Both of these are difficult. It's really hard for us to open our mind enough to consider that we are so large, to consider that what we've been told may not be the whole truth or even contain any part of truth. That takes a very wide open mind, and it takes a very wide open heart to begin to sense the truth as such. So you can throw your mind open, but if your heart isn't also open, you're not connected to the resource which qualifies what the mind is now willing to consider. You need to have both an open heart and an open mind because the two work together.
Mm-hmm.
So the first union is an inner union. The mind could be thought of as masculine. The heart could be thought of as feminine. Here's the queen and the king, the princess and the prince played out once again. The yin and the yang played out once again. The water and the fire played out once again. There is a need to unify these parts of ourselves before any of these other things are permitted to happen. Anything we're meeting today, anything we've met in any day prior to this. There's something about this 59th angel which becomes central to all of the angels and what they are calling out of us, celebrating within us. It begins here. If you have an open mind but a closed heart, let me play this out. Let's think. If you have a closed mind and a closed heart, if both are closed, you are a cold person. You're stuck in place and you are impenetrable. Mm-hmm. If you have an open heart but a closed mind, you are a fanatic. I think that's what happens, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. If you have an open mind but a closed heart, you end up becoming, I think, some version of a liberal. There's a lot of mental movement that's permitted, but it isn't allowed to flow in union with the heart. When both the mind, and I'm not saying liberal as in a political statement, mm-hmm. I'm referring to a way of meeting life. Mm-hmm. Same with fanatic. It's not just religious. This plays out in every area of our experience. We can be this way on the subject of money. We can be this way on the subject of relationships. This isn't a political statement. It's a holistic one.
Yeah. I think when you have an open mind and a closed heart, it prevents anything from actually coming to fruition.
Correct, exactly.
You can't ground anything, any of your ideas, and your dreams cannot come true. They cannot actually manifest.
Yeah, so another word for that would be, it's like you're lost in fantasy.
Yeah, you fail to take the action necessary.
Right. So in opening both the heart and the mind, we become capable of sensing our way forward in life on purpose with our eyes wide open. We become unified internally. We become whole beings. That's essentially what it is. The mind and the heart must both be open in order to meet life completely. And that's what this angel is telling us. And that's why the embodiment is intimacy. If you will have an open enough mind to begin to see the truth about yourself and an open enough heart to qualify what you're seeing as true, you will begin to meet your life intimately. We talked yesterday about the pathway of engagement and how it's totally impossible to totally engage with anything if there's even the slightest amount of fear or worry as to the quality of that thing. Mm-hmm. If there's any possibility of danger, you will withhold some part of yourself inevitably. So it's only through this complete openness that we are capable of complete engagement. And it's only through complete openness that we are finally able and willing to meet life as an intimate encounter, as a direct exchange of presence and energies. That's what this movement is calling for. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we find this in the world of the hearts. Of course, we haven't been led to this discovery until now. It's needed here. It would have been premature in any of these other areas. We didn't know that, of course, when all of this was being organized for us. We see it very clearly now. And of course, all of this connects to the 37th angel, one of the softest, most open-hearted angels that we're going to find. Mm-hmm. The angel of affection on the pathway of tenderness. We know that the pathway of openness is about throwing open our minds and our hearts to the light of truth. When we open our hearts and we permit that part of us to begin to express, and we have a unified mind which is now capable of expressing the life of the heart creatively and verbally and explicitly, we meet the path of tenderness. We meet the expression of affection. This is the tone of the heart. Mm-hmm. Tenderness is a quality of touch. That touch can be physical. That touch can be tonal, verbal. It can be invisible. Yeah. We touch others by virtue of whatever may be playing out within us. If the quality of what's playing out within you is closed and tight and fearful, that's how you touch others. That is not a tender touch. It's a harsh and terrifying one. And even under the best of intentions, the quality of that touch is going to be less than what you or anyone around you deserves. Tenderness is about what happens once you permit the heart to open. Tenderness is a soft and heart-centered quality of touch. You are tender with the things you love. Your heart pours its affection into the things you love, the things you care about. You are careful with the things you love.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pause here. I have an example of what this feels like to me,
Okay.
that I'm excited to share, but I want to give you a chance to speak. I've been doing a lot of talking.
Oh, no. I think you're right on the money, and I'm enjoying what you're sharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I think of this pathway of tenderness, I'm reminded of my dad, actually.
Mm.
My dad is a finishing expert. It used to be cars and car paints. He was in the automotive industry for his entire career. And he is an expert at getting a perfect finish on anything. Again, it began with cars, but he loves working with wood. He's just a genius in this very, very specific way. And the guitar that's sitting behind us that you currently see kind of peeking out from behind Lara here, this is a really special guitar that is valuable. It's like a good guitar. But when we first purchased it, the finish of the wood had these like specks of sand in it. You could feel them if you ran your fingers across the wood, especially if you ran your fingers tenderly across the wood. You could feel these specks of, it felt like little specks of sand all over the surface of the instrument, even though it's a very expensive instrument. That did not stop us from purchasing the instrument because its voice was so beautiful, and because my dad's a finishing expert. So we bring this thing home, and my dad sets up the big island counter in the center of their kitchen, and he gets to work. And I just remember watching the way my dad handled this guitar. He wasn't just working on something. This wasn't a project for him. When he would pick up first one type of sandpaper and then another type of sandpaper and work his way down to finer and finer and finer grits of sandpaper, one little teeny tiny step at a time, as he took literally hours to completely refinish this instrument from top to bottom. And I was watching the way he was touching this instrument, and then he would finish working it with one piece of sandpaper, and he'd touch the wood. He would stroke the wood with this just tenderness of touch. This was not just a genius expressing his expertise. This was my dad pouring his whole heart, his love, into an instrument for his son. This was my dad preparing a gift for me, and doing all of that without my even having to ask. The whole experience was a perfect expression of affection, as my dad walked the pathway of tenderness, literally, physically, tangibly. That's what the pathway of tenderness is about. If I'm going to speak to my wife, I should use a tone that is tender. Why? Because I adore her. Mm-hmm. Because I care for her. Because I would never wish to shatter any part of her through harshness, through worry, through fear, through anger, through any of these things that tend to move through our human experience. The same is true of everything, though. What in your life is not deserving of this caring attention? What in your life is not deserving of your whole heart? Lara's been saying this for days. If it's present in your experience, it's cause for celebration. If it's cause for celebration, it deserves your whole affection. If you're giving it affection, you must use tenderness. This is so far beyond just mindfulness. This is not about tiptoeing through life. Mm-hmm. This is about moving in a way that carries the tone of your heart.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely, as with all of these positions, all of these tarot members, it hinges on this trust, this willingness to trust that you don't have to force anything. You don't have to try and figure something out. You don't have to get your opinions or ideas or your version of things across. It is about treating each moment with tenderness because that's the right thing to do. And there's nothing to prove. You don't have to fix things. It's all perfect.
Yeah, that's right. You're learning to cherish rather than criticize or fix or improve. Mm-hmm. We're not in the business of fixing anything. Everything is perfect. So what we're in the business of is learning to recognize that. Remember, empower perfection by recognizing perfection. And then we're moving differently as a result of that. Mm-hmm. This is another kind of, maybe a sillier example, but another personal one. So there are two things I love. I love to vacuum, and I love Dyson vacuums. Mm-hmm. I'm a total nerd for Dyson vacuums. I love how innovative they are. I love their design. I love the colors. I love everything about it. I could go on about Dyson vacuums for an embarrassing length of time. I've always owned a Dyson vacuum. And the minute that I lose or misplace one, I purchase another. I just love them. And I love to use them. But something that I've had to practice, and still to this day practice, is, again, a little strange. But when I'm vacuuming, it's easy for me to grip the handle of that vacuum hard. For no reason. The thing weighs nothing. It just glides along on the ground. There's no actual reason for me to be gripping this thing with this death grip as if I'm not going to be able to control it unless I do. But you can literally connect the dots between a need to control and the grip. This is a surprisingly significant metaphor. Mm-hmm. As I'm vacuuming and choosing to notice the grip and then loosen the grip, realizing that all I really need to do is shape my fingers. I don't need any grip at all. All I need to do is shape my fingers around this handle. It's not going anywhere. I have complete control without any amount of force, without any need to control. The thing is easy to handle, and the vacuuming moves more fluidly and more comfortably and more effortlessly when I'm not gripping. There's every reason for me not to grip, and yet still every time I start to vacuum, I have to remind myself, hey, you don't got to squeeze this thing to death. The same is true when I'm brushing my teeth. This may seem kind of goofy, these examples, but do you understand that without a wide open mind and a wide open heart, you're not even going to recognize that? The next time some of you who are watching this now go to vacuum, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm gripping the hell out of this thing too. Mm-hmm. Who notices that sort of thing? Who cares? Someone whose heart and mind have been thrown open to every part of their experience, that's who. Someone who has come to recognize the perfection of every detail of their experience. That's who. Someone who understands that everything and every moment is literally sacred. That's the sort of person who realizes that for no reason they're squeezing the handle of their vacuum cleaner too hard. I'm not saying this to become all high and mighty. I'm saying this to say, I'm the prince. I'm learning what it means to move elegantly even when it comes to vacuuming or brushing my teeth. Mm-hmm. And I'm in the process. I'm still gripping too hard and I'm learning to not. We're all on the same path, but the path is calling for something. It's not calling for us to earn our place on the throne. We're not earning kinghood. That's mm-hmm. inevitable. Mm-hmm. The kingdom is yours as the prince, just as totally as it is yours as the princess, just as totally as it is yours as the queen or the king. Mm-hmm. That's built in. You're not earning anything. What you are doing is learning how to become more tender with the gift of life that has been given, more affectionate, more open-hearted, more available to the gift of life that's been given. You're learning how to cherish. You're learning how to recognize what is precious and to treat it as such, rather than klutzing and cluttering and clomping your way through life, blindly and ignorantly breaking all of the beautiful things that have been given. Of course, we can't break anything, but we know what it is like to bump our way through life as opposed to dance our way through life. And the elegance being developed by this prince is the very sort of thing we're describing here. Yes, it has to do with vacuuming. Yes, it has to do with conversation. Mm-hmm. Yes, it has to do with your ideas. There are elegant and empowering ideas, and there are deeply disempowering ideas. Mm-hmm. The ones you choose to hold, you're choosing to hold. Each of us is responsible for that. So we claim responsibility for it. That's what this prince does. And that willingness to claim responsibility is the very thing that permits the movement that inevitably becomes the king. Mm-hmm. everything we've built, everything we're communicating, everything we're doing our best to embody and to live day after day, no matter what's happening around us or within us, is representative of what we find here. Every offer we have on our website is representative of what we find here. Every word that the angels have offered us is representative of what we find here. The forgotten sense is about resourcing you to not only understand, but to utilize what you've come to know. The frequency portal is about opening your mind so completely enough and utilizing your heart so directly that you actually become this great big vision of yourself that you have what? Cultivated. Mm-hmm. Seer training is about taking all of this a million miles an hour into the depths of your experience. It's about getting out of your head and into the body of your experience, using your everyday life, using those obstacles and challenges that you have been banging your head against for your entire life up until now to produce the very liberation you deserve. Everything that we are about is being described by these angels, by this character.
It reminds me of our oracle message this morning. You're not being tested, you've been called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's something that, the prince has to understand. He has to realize that he's not being tested. Nobody's challenging his birthright. It's about calling him up into that place that he wants, that is his birthright. But he has to walk the path. He has to make the choices. He has to, realize that to cultivate elegance, he's going to have to practice it by, bumping into things and being conscious of his movements so that they can become elegant. That's grounding that experience. That's what it means to actually, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And tying the knot here to the embodiment of family, we talked about the embodiment of intimacy on the other side. Mm-hmm. But this embodiment of family, whatever else it may mean, it absolutely does connect to this idea of remembering. This is about recalling all the parts of your own inner family, so to speak. Remembering all these different facets of deeper reality, of underlying truth, all of which sustain beneath the storm cloud of other ideas you've had about yourself. The embodiment of family is the feeling of remembering. Mm-hmm. It's that feeling of familiarity, of reunion, of returning home to yourself. It's an inevitable feeling. It's there's a word I'm looking for. Unavoidable feeling. When you feel that sense of family, I mean, we see it in movies. Some of us have been fortunate enough to actually feel that sense of belonging in our own families in real life. We know, if not directly, then at the very least figuratively, what the feeling of family is supposed to feel like, that deep sense of fulfillment and safety and belonging. That's what's embodied here. Yeah. That's what happens when everything around you becomes backlit by its spiritual nature. When you recognize everything as sacred, then everything and every moment is a friend. And you begin to sense yourself as a part of something beyond you, as a part of something larger than you that still includes you, that supports you, that feeds you. That's family. That's the embodiment of family.
The 64 angels actually describe themselves as the family of angels.
Yeah, you're right.
As well.
You're right. Mm-hmm.
And they're, of course, our core expressions. They're a part of us.
They're all a part of us. Mm-hmm. Every day we meet two of these angels, we are remembering a part of ourselves, provided that we choose to, provided that we are open to, provided that the mind is open enough to consider that it could possibly be true that perfection is a fundamental reality, not an earned one, provided that the heart is open enough to validate or confirm that awareness. Every one of you watching these videos is doing this same work, whether you're aware of it or not. There's no way you would be hearing these words this far into this video if that were not the case. Some part of your mind, some part of your heart is already open to this. The movement is to continually open, to think higher and better thoughts, to open the heart more and to express yet more love and more affection, because that's what pours through the heart. We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about affection. We're spending a lot of time today talking about affection. Tomorrow, we meet the Angel of Hearts, who represents the essence of the hearts, which is affection.
Wow.
There's a great theme playing out here. We're recognizing repeated themes, almost like these heat zones as we move through these different virtues, these different sets of virtues. We've watched this happen over and over again. Right now, we are in the theme of affection. We were in the theme of desire. We were in the theme of enjoyment. Mm-hmm. Each one played out for days and days. Now we're in this theme of affection. It's unavoidable, and it's about so much more than
hugs and kisses.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It is so appropriate for this affection and this tenderness to play itself out in those very physical, even sexual ways. So important to do that and to permit that when and where it's appropriate. But what's actually happening here is much deeper. True affection, true tenderness is something invisible that pours out of your fingertips, something invisible in your feet when you move, something invisible in your spine, something invisible that pours out of your eyes that no one can actually see, but everyone can totally sense, whether they're conscious of that or not. True affection is the result of a heart that's open to life, the result of an intimate encounter with your life. It's unavoidable. It can't be helped. The moment you see the miracle, your eyes light up and that affection pours through. We talked about that yesterday. We're talking about it today. It's not gonna permit us to forget it, because that's what we're called to do. That's who we're called to be. The life we've been given is a gift, and so we treat it as one. It's pretty simple stuff on the surface. We're using a lot of words to come at it, but they're necessary.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because every day we wake up, half of us are gripping the hell out of that handle. Mm-hmm. All of us are gripping the hell out of that handle in one way or another on one subject or another. So we choose to walk this pathway of tenderness. I don't know if there's a more perfect description of the pathway I've been choosing to walk, embodied, the pathway I've been choosing to embody for a really long time now, in these kind of subtle, quiet ways that you didn't even know about this until today. It's not like we talk about this. It's personal, very personal, very private. This pathway of tenderness, from my perspective, is a really good way to develop both the control and the sensitivity we talked about the other day. We need to develop control and sensitivity. The two come together. This is how and this is where. We're not just being mindful. We're being careful. We're being filled with so much care that we touch everything with the tenderness it deserves. I hope this makes sense. I hope it feels personal to you as well. I hope that those of you watching, and even us, I hope there are like ideas about, well, I could, interact with my mug differently. I could maybe not squeeze my pen so hard when I'm writing. I could, walk with more awareness of the space. These things are practices, but they're not arbitrary, and they're not embodiment practices. This is spirituality 101. Our experience, our physical experience, is the point of contact between spirit and matter. There's another union, by the way. Another expression of union is your literal physical human life. Mm-hmm. As spirit and matter meet in the middle, which is you, which is this moment and everything that it contains. It's a pretty wild thing to meet our lives in this way, to literally consider them sacred, not to post it as a cute meme on Facebook or Instagram, but to look around us and to understand it as true. Mm-hmm. That changes things. As this happens for you, this is the path you begin to walk. This path of openness, this path of tenderness. You throw your mind open, you throw your heart open, and you get to work.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah. Is there anything you would add?
I don't think so.
Then I think this is a nice, soft place for us to land.
Okay.
And to meet the day, us and them. We're grateful for your presence.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you for the love you've poured into these moments, these minutes, these conversations, day after day. Thank you for having an open enough mind and an open enough heart to receive what it is that's pouring out of ours. Thank you for being a part of this family with us, for being everything we've looked at, all these different characters, just as totally and just as sincerely as we intend to be. We may not literally see you since we're looking at a camera, but we see you. And we're grateful that you're here on this journey with us. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And we wish you a beautiful, elegant, enjoyable day. Goodbye.
Bye.
For now.